Pedals are kind of important when it comes to sim racing, but a good set of pedals can be kind of pricey. Enter the Fanatec CSL Elite Pedals LC with a not too low but not too high price tag of $199 US. But the question is, do these pedals perform at the same level of the price, or maybe even a little higher? Let's find out.
Sim racing chassis provided by Next Level Racing. Check them out at nextlevelracing.com.
Before we get started, let's go over a couple things. First, if you want to see me fondle these pedals for about 20 minutes up close with a sexy POV view, go check out our first look from last month where I go over a bunch of the specs and that kind of stuff. But for this review, we're going to focus more on performance. Secondly, I'll only be reviewing the 3-pedal load cell equipped version of the CSL Elites today. This is a pre-production unit, and it actually doesn't have the electronics that support the 2-pedal only set, so we'll have to cover that in a review later. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the CSL Elite Pedals LC design. It's actually a very clever modular design, with the wide aluminum heel rest acting as the central docking station for the 3 individual pedal units, also made entirely out of aluminum. There's also 2 metal rods with plastic spacers included in the LC to prevent any side-to-side movement of the pedals, although I'd be surprised if they moved considering the large bolts used to hold them in place on the heel rest. And FYI, I did ask Fanatec if you could run these pedals without these metal rods, and they said you could, but they suggested not to do so because they're there to prevent side-to-side movement. So with that said, of course, I did try them out without it, and I have to say, I didn't feel any movement, but for the long-term longevity of these pedals, it'd probably be a good idea to just put them on. It's not that big of a deal. The entire pedal set comes in a not flat, but not glossy black finish with very little branding, which is a good thing in my opinion. The murdered out look comes across as much more of a sleeper than its more flashy, look at me, I'm Darth Vader, big brother, the Clubsport Pedals V3. And speaking of the V3s, let's use them as a point of reference for the CSL LCs. First off, even though the CSL is much wider than the V3 at 14.5 inches, it is much, much lighter. And while this probably doesn't mean that much to you, since most likely you guys aren't going to be constantly moving these pedals around and taking them off and on your rig, for this reviewer who had to mount and dismount these things a bunch of times, I appreciated the lighter weight. Secondly, the pedal placement is very different between the two. The V3s are a more traditional fixed design where the pedal upright positions are locked and the only adjustment is available by moving the flat pedal faces up and down or side to side, or using the Tilton style pedal faces that give you more height but no side to side movement. Comparatively, due to the modular design, the CSL Elite pedals can be moved side to side much more than the V3s, although no up and down adjustments are available. Unlike the V3s, the CSL pedal uprights and Tilton style faces are one piece, so there's no adjustment in the faces themselves. So what does all this pedal movement and positioning really mean? Well, it means that I actually kind of prefer the CSL pedal positions comparatively to the CSW V3s. I just really like that you can move a huge distance side to side. It's really nice. And even though the height is fixed, which I know is a bit of a red flag to people, I really do think they picked a really ideal height, and also they put on these really nice flat face Tilton pedals, because even though you can get more height out of the CSW using the Tilton pedals there, those pedal faces I don't really care for. They have this really deep groove for the bolts, and I really hate that groove feeling underneath my feet when I'm wearing socks, and I even still feel it when I'm wearing shoes, so I just don't care for it, where those issues have been rectified here with the CSL pedal faces. So let's take a moment and talk a little bit more about this huge side-to-side movement that you can have in the CSL pedals. So thanks to this modular design, this is really the first set of pedals where I've been able to separate the gas and brake pedal to the distance that I've always wanted to, where I've been able to have my legs straight out in front of me when I'm racing. And I know I've talked about this ad nauseum, so apologies to the Inside Sim Racing faithful, but I've talked for a long time how the tough thing with pedals, especially sim racing pedals, is that pretty much all of them up until this point, I've always had to turn my left leg in to use the brake pedal. Even though I've mounted pedals as far left in my rig as possible and I've moved pedal faces over to the left more, no matter what, my left leg is still going across my body, which is fine when you're using a set of lower end pedals that there isn't much resistance on the brake pedal. But when you're using something like a load cell, that pressure, and especially because I like to run a heavy load cell, that pressure of having to push down on the brake over a long race, like an endurance race, can be kind of tweaky on your knee. So it's best to straighten out your leg. And up until this point, haven't been able to be completely straight. But now, as you see, especially in this configuration, my left leg is straight when I'm braking, and I'm very excited that I can now get rid of any of that cross-body movement and have all my force going straight in front of me. Now, I know there'll be some of you out there who will look at this and go, what about heel towing? And yes, I admit, this large gap isn't ideal for heel and towing. It can be done, but it's not ideal. But, if I'm being honest with myself, and I think if most of you guys on the community are being honest with yourself, not all you guys, but most of you guys, most of us aren't running cars in sim racing that require the clutch. We're running more modern cars, which, for unfortunate or not, have just a gas and brake pedal. So I rather have this gap and be more comfortable in endurance races where I'm using something with flappy paddles than go and have this really close. But if you are a heel tower and you like to row your own gears, then with this design, you can get it as close as you want. I mean, you can get this brake pedal right next to the throttle and really make it easy, or get it so close that it's hard. So that's the beauty of this side-to-side adjustability. Speaking of adjustability, this is probably a good time to deliver a public service announcement, or two of them to be specific. First up, there's a lot of pieces and parts happening in these pedals, and you have to be kind of careful when you are moving them around. While it's easy to move around, you got to kind of keep things organized. One of the things I noticed that you have these black spacers that are on the rods, and these spacers actually do have a direction. It's a tongue and groove system where they do nest against one another. So when you're moving these around, make sure you have them in the right orientation. Secondly, and this is the big one, and please listen to me on this one. When you are moving these pedals around, you must be careful that there is a wire that comes out of them that plugs into the I/O board underneath the pedals, and you have to make sure that wire is running out the channel in the center of the pedal unit. So when I first moved the brake pedal, when I was trying to move it from where Fanatec sent it to me over to this further away position, I was in a rush and I wasn't really thinking, and I thought I had a gap between the bolt extrusions on this pedal base, and so I ran the wires through there. It turns out there is not a gap there. There is an extruded piece of aluminum that acts like a guillotine, and like a guillotine, it cut my wire in half. Thankfully, through some patience and probably a bit of luck, I was able to repair the cable, and I've been running the pedals with no issues. So, I guess if you do this at home, there's a way to salvage it. But please, listen to me. Listen to the Fanatec instructions, which clearly said to do this, but like any good reviewer, throw instructions out the window and just start doing stuff. So don't be a dummy like me, and be careful when you're moving things around. Modular design is very cool, but you can mess things up, so don't do that. Now let's transition to the feel of the pedals, and first up, the gas pedal. The gas pedal works, and there isn't much more to say about it. It's 12 bits of resolution, which anything above 10 is plenty, and it offers a bit of resistance via the non-upgradable internal spring and gear system, but nothing that is going to blow your socks off. I say it's probably about 50 to 60% of the V3 throttle's resistance. With that said, I never found myself having trouble rolling onto the throttle, something that is more difficult with pedals that have very little resistance, so I think it's just fine for the price point. Like the gas, the clutch, aka the brake on the non-load cell 2-pedal CSL Elites, is also fine. Its internal spring is a little larger, so it snaps back a little quicker. It probably kicks back at about 50% the force of the CSW V3 clutch, but its 12 bits of resolution get the job done, and I don't have any complaints. So now let's go to the star of the show, the load cell brake pedal. The load cell brake pedal that takes the 2-pedal set price of $79 US, increases it all the way to $199 US. So for a single pedal that is nearly twice the price of 2 pedals and a heel rest, this thing better be good. And it is. Arriving with 4 different sets of elastomer springs with hardness ratings of 45, 65, 85, and 95, whatever that means, you can customize the brake feel from the equivalent to stepping on a sponge to you better have your big boy boots on to everything in between. And that in between is where it gets cool, because you can mix and match the elastomer springs to your heart's desire. You can even remove the polyurethane foam that Fanatec has in the 3rd position and replace it with another elastomer spring for more immediate feedback at tip-in. And what makes experimenting a breeze and even kind of fun is the toolless design, which makes it really easy to swap out the different elastomer springs while it's still on your rig, which is a big plus. Performance-wise, I actually enjoy the CSL brake a little more than the CSW V3 brake. While overall I like the V3 brake with damper kit and the Elator mod that still hasn't become available to you guys in the public, it doesn't allow for much travel with the amount of brake pressure that I like to run. On the other hand, I feel like I can get a little more travel with the CSL load cell brake while maintaining the same stiff brake feel. It also feels a little more progressive to me, with a nice building resistance as the elastomer springs compress against one another. And naturally, like the gas and clutch pedals, the brake is also very much overkill when it comes to resolution at 16 bits. So, there you have it. The single pedal that is nearly twice the cost of everything else you see here really is worth it. So before we get to my final thoughts, let's go over a few odds and ends. First up, while the single piece heel design is slick, it does make mounting the pedals a real pain in the ass, with tiny compartments to access the front bolts that had me learning about other religions just so I could use their god's name in vain as well. Equally as annoying is the tucked away I/O panel if you forget to connect your cable before mounting the pedals. I mounted the pedals multiple times only to have to take them back off and plug either the USB cable or the RJ12 cable that runs to the Fanatec wheelbase back in. While the rubber cover over the pedal bolts doesn't look great in photos, it's much less noticeable visually in person, and I never felt my heels resting on it and overall didn't find an issue. Fanatec decided to make a software update after our first look, where I fired up the PC so I could visually see the changes I was making to the brake force via the Fanatec control panel, even though I was only racing on the Xbox One. Now, when you adjust the brake force on a Fanatec wheelbase, such as the Fanatec CSL Elite wheelbase that we'll be also reviewing very soon, you can press on the brake and visually see via the shift lights how much pressure is needed to ensure that you're registering 100% brake travel. This is a nice little feature and should come in handy for those who primarily race on the Xbox One. The bump stops for the gas and clutch pedals can be rotated to give you 2 different travel options, but I didn't really notice the difference. And lastly, going with the options theme, having 3 different pedal face materials is nice. My favorite is the bare aluminum, but if I didn't have shoes, I certainly use the rubber covers for comfort and grip. And even though I had my reservations in my first look, I did try out the anti-skid stick-ons. At first, they held up pretty well. Then I started to heel and toe, and my shoes quickly removed the texture in just 3 laps around Watkins Glen. They might be okay if you don't slide your feet around on the pedals, but if you do, probably better off going with the bare aluminum. So let's get to my final thoughts on the Fanatec CSL Elite Pedals LC, and to no surprise, I do really like these pedals, and I was thinking about it, and I think even if you remove the modular design, I would still be pretty bullish on these pedals and would certainly say that you should definitely check them out. But toss in the modular design and how cool I think that is, and how much I enjoy the pedal position, because comfort when racing is a big deal. I mean, I know that here on Inside Sim Racing, we are constantly swapping out hardware, and it's difficult to go from hardware to hardware to hardware and run competitive lap times because it's constantly changing. But finding something that you're really comfortable with really does help. Now, the fascinating thing is, I kind of wonder if Fanatec almost made these too well when compared to the CSW V3s. Yes, the V3s are more flashy looking, they certainly have a nicer finish, and they have a better throttle and clutch pedals, but I think the CSL Elite pedals are a stronger design choice. Having a super wide heel rest that allows you to move the pedals over such great distance is just a really excellent design choice. And I know the pedals vertically can't be moved and you can't adjust the face plates here and all that kind of stuff, but I think the positioning and the design they went with is really strong, and really couldn't be much better for something that is a fixed unit like this. I also feel like the load cell brake design is really spot on. I mean, I really do love the feeling of the increase of pressure when you have a mechanical stop like you have from these elastomer rings. I love that you can get some travel. I really do like the V3 CSWs from Fanatec, but to get the brake pressure I want, I have so little travel. But here I'm able to get a similar brake pressure feel, but I'm getting some travel back into the pedal, and it feels more realistic. And I know when you have a brake pressure and a load cell, it's not travel based, but it's still nice to have some travel, especially when you're used to driving real cars and stuff like that. It's just really nice, and having this be this hot swappable toolless design where you can go in and test all these combinations, combinations that you wouldn't test if you had to, mechanically unbolt or unfasten something. I mean, you're probably not going to try as many combos, but here, because it's so easy to swap things out, you're going to try a lot more combos. You're going to dial into more the exact setup that works for you. So I just think quite a bit of the design behind this brake pedal. And again, in comparison to the CSW V3s, this comes in at 2/3 the price of a V3, and that's if you're not including the damper kit that you can get on the V3, which we did suggest getting that on the brake pedal. So you're getting a lot of performance, and in my opinion, because for me it comes down to brake pedal only, in the grand scheme of things, these pedals, good enough. They work. I can live with them. But when it comes down to the brake pedal, I'm getting, essentially the same performance or better performance for a lot cheaper price. Now, do I have any complaints about these pedals? Nothing major. Mounting them is a pain between trying to get the bolts in and then making sure you have the cables already set up and that. The finish can get a little fingerprinty here. It would have been nice if they could have done something other than having to put this rubber to cover up these bolts that was a little more aesthetically pleasing. Would have been cool if the polyurethane foam here was black, so it was 100% murdered out look. But these are all really minor quibbles. This is not showstoppers, and especially once you get it on your rig, like I said, a lot of you guys probably aren't going to be swapping things in and out like we do here. So yeah, complaints are very minor, but nothing here is stopping me from recommending these pedals. So we'll leave it there for our review of the Fanatec CSL Elite Pedals LC, and really nothing else to say but good job, Fanatec. These are a really nice set of pedals. So hopefully you enjoyed this review, and if you did, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Also check out our website, isrtv.com, for latest news, reviews, and our popular forums. Also check out the description below for our Amazon affiliate link. Click on the link, shop through Amazon. Doesn't cost you a thing, kicks us back a little bit because everything helps when you're doing these very long intensive reviews. This one took a while. So for John Sable, thanks for watching Inside Sim Racing. See you guys next time.